All right, so I wanted to make a quick, relatively short tutorial on how to go from SketchUp into Adobe Illustrator, which is where we do all of our finishing line work and that sort of thing, and presentation stuff. So I have this model in here, and I think it's pretty much ready to go into Illustrator. So I have it done to a state which I think is satisfactory. And so if you haven't done so already, you should assign materials if you plan on using materials at all. If not, we can sort of set everything to white if we need to. But for this case, I'll utilize the colors that I have. You also want to make sure that you turn on your shadows and set them to where you want so that you're ready to go. And lastly, let's make sure that we are on the right style for this model. So you can see right now I have a white background. If you come over here on the right and you hit this button right here, this is your styles icon. Yours might be set to this one, which has this sort of green background, which is fine, but I find that for most things, especially if we're going into like page documents and things like that, or we're going to print stuff, I don't really like the green or anything like that. So I'm going to set it to just pure white, and that also gets rid of the sky, which is something that I want in this case. So a couple other things you might want to do before you get ready to go. If I were to take like a 3/4 view or something like this, I'm seeing these axes lines in the background. I'm going to go ahead and close this for a sec. I want to go ahead and get rid of those. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the dog and type axes. This says view axes. You could set a shortcut up if you wanted. I'm just going to go ahead and toggle it off, and that just gets rid of those. That way they're not showing up in our views at all, which is what we want. You never want to give away the fact that this is a model. So now in this case, we're not really going to see them, but I think it's always a good idea to turn those off. So the next thing that you should do is you should sort of position your camera where you want it. And what I would recommend that you do at this point is also save a scene for this particular view. So scenes are over here on the right. If I click on this button, you can see that I have a bunch of scenes already set up that I had previously made for this project, although none of them are in the exact style that I wanted. So you can set the style as well as the shadow positions and the rendering type and all that stuff. So what we're going to do here is, because I don't have this one saved, I'm going to position it exactly where I want and then just hit the plus button right here. It says, warning, we're about to create a new scene. Just hit OK, it's fine. And that will then get added to this list, so it's scene 14. I'm just going to go ahead and call this up shot perspective. It's fine. I guess I already named it that one, so upshot. That works. Okay, so the benefit of that is that if you start going in here and I need to fix this, or let's say you accidentally bumped your mouse or something like that, you went into Illustrator and needed to come back and edit some stuff. By having this scene saved, I just click on the thumbnail and it takes me exactly back to that position, which is really important in this scenario. So at this point, I have everything set up the way that I want. And we're going to do multiple exports in order to get this into Illustrator. So the first thing I want to do is I want to just take one DWG of this specific view. Okay? So I'm going to come up here to the menu button, go down to Export, DWG, and this is a 2D view. So we're not exporting a 3D model, we're just taking a 2D view of this. It's going to say your model must be saved, which is what you want to do, right? So we'll hit yes. And then we can hit, you don't have to worry about these settings, we're just going to hit export, okay? Cool, so it says your export has been started up here. It may take it a minute just because there's a lot of lines maybe in your model. This one has a decent amount. Not like a ton, but a decent amount. Okay, so now it says your export has been completed, so I'm going to go ahead and hit download. It's important that you hit download because otherwise you'll never actually get it on your computer. So it's showing up right here. I'm not going to worry about it right now, but we'll come back to it in a minute. Okay, so the first export that we did had all of the lines in here, and in this case they're called the edges. So I want to turn those off now for my next export. So I'm going to go to the dog, and I'm going to type edges. It says view edges. I've assigned a keyboard shortcut of V, so you can do that if you want. But I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and you'll see that there's no lines in this model at all anymore, right? It's literally just the rendered view, okay? So I'm going to go back here just for a second, and you'll notice that it turns the edges back on. That's because I saved this scene that way. So again, we'll go back here, edges, turn them off. And if I were to export this now, I wouldn't actually get anything because there's no lines. So when we're doing the exports, it's just taking the lines that are in the model. So I need to then turn on something else called profiles. Okay? And when I turn those on, these are the lines that are, quote unquote, touching the air. So I would zoom my view, but I don't want to have to go through all that process again. But basically, these are the ones that should be dark in a 3D drawing. So good to go. Now it's critical that we save this with those changes though. So it says saved here, but that's from a couple minutes ago. So all I'm going to do is just kind of double click on something to pretend like I'm editing it and then click out. Now I have this save option. What that's going to do is it's going to update the settings that we just did, where I turned off the edges and turned on the profiles. Now I can go here to export DWG 2D. Again, the exports are just for the lines. So we're going to hit export now. Again, it's going to take it a second here to get all of those lines. This one should not take as long because there's less lines than before. So it should show up here momentarily. Okay, so we can hit download. Again, it's just going to show up here. Sort of keep in mind which one is which. So I know that this is 6 in this case and that one's 7. So 7 is the one with the profiles. Okay, lastly, we want to get a rendered view of this. So the render is everything with no lines, right? So I'm going to go turn off profiles now to where we were before, where I just have the shadows and the colors. So this is sort of important because when you get into Illustrator, you might have some overlap in lines. So in this case, because we don't have any lines, I can't do an export. I'm not going to get anything out of that file because we turned everything off. But I can download a PNG or a PNG. This is an image file, which is in this case what we want. Now, when I hit that, I get this export image dialog box. And a critical thing here is that we need to increase the size of this. So this is 1920 by 977. That's just kind of like my default screen size, which isn't that great. If I were to scale this thing up, let's say, to take up a whole poster or something, the whole thing would be really pixelated and would not be good enough quality. So what we need to do is increase this. So I'm going to make this, let's say 4,000 by 2,000, let's say. And feel free to play around with those. Those are going to change the ratio here. So you can see that it's pretty wide relative to its height. It's because it's half. If, for instance, I were to make this just for a second 2,000, you can see it's a square now, but it's cropping out some information. So we'll change this back to 4, so it looks pretty good. I'd rather have more in here than not enough, right? Because I can always crop this if I need to. And so that looks pretty good to me. Another nice thing here is if you have saved scenes, like maybe I saved a scene with just the lines off, I can actually go here and choose from those scenes. Now, I don't want to do that in this case because I made some edits, but this is fine. Looks good to me. I could also have a transparent background. Might be kind of nice. So in this case, I actually am going to turn it on just to show you what that looks like. And then I'll hit export as PNG. This one might take a second as well, especially if you increase the size, but that one, I didn't make it huge, so didn't take that long. So these are my 3 files that I'll be utilizing. I now need to go to Illustrator because I'm done in SketchUp. So when I open up Illustrator, I have this default page, and I'm going to go to New File, this blue button, and we're going to set up a custom template. I've already sort of created one here. So for us, we have width of 18, height of 24. I'm actually going to flip those, so I could retype them, but there's this orientation button right here, so that just basically changes. It toggles those numbers, right? So I'm going to go to landscape. I only need 1 artboard also, so I'm going to change that to 1. Everything else looks good, so we're going to go ahead and hit create. And when I do that, this should, maybe, let me hit it again, give me my artboard. And your artboard is just your piece of paper. So remember in Illustrator, if you hold Alt and you scroll, you can zoom in and out. Before I place anything, I think it's a good idea to set up your layers. So your layers are over here. It's this button. It kind of looks like a little isometric. And when I click on that, by default, you have layer 1. I'm going to go ahead and make 2 more by hitting this plus button. 1 for each of my files that I'm taking out of SketchUp. So these should be in order, and the stacking does matter. So layer 3, I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to rename this Profiles. I'm going to double click on layer 2 and call it Edges, and then layer 1, I'll call this Render. The render is just the colored shaded file. Okay, I'm actually going to start on Edges. So when you click on these layers, they turn sort of this blue color. That just means that's the current layer. So I'm going to click on Edges, then I'm going to go to File, Place. It's kind of in the middle. When I do that, it's going to bring up my downloads. So I have a bunch of things in here that I clearly need to organize. But just if you remember, this one with the 6 was my edges. So I'm going to hit Place and give it a second. It should come in like this with this little icon, sort of giving me a preview. I think it's a good idea to try and get it on the corner where the intersection is. You don't have to, but this kind of makes your life a little bit easier when it comes time to scaling this thing. Okay, cool. So I placed it. It comes in as red. That's just the color of the layer. So when I click off of it, you'll see that it's not selected anymore. But we don't have any line weight here, right? All of this stuff is sort of the default, like 0.7087. That's just what it comes in as. So while I have this here, might as well change the stroke weight. So if I click on it, it should come in as a group. I'm going to come up here, and I can hit this drop down, and I'm going to change it to 0.5. So when I click out, it doesn't look like that much of a change, but there's enough of a change in there, and we could always play with this later. Okay, cool. Now that that's done, I'm now going to go to click on Profiles, go to File, Place, and this one is going to be this ZincMine 7. You can also tell that it's an AutoCAD file, but this sort of blue and yellow icon. So I'll hit Place. Again, it's going to give me that preview. So again, I'm going to try and get it right on the corner. If I do my work well, this should come in literally right on top of the other one. Now it's a little off, right? You can tell that it's slightly off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to Edges and lock it by hitting that blank space. And then I can really like fine tune this. So I was just a hair off with placing this thing. So I'm just kind of double checking a couple of spots to make sure that it is in fact perfectly aligned. That looks good. So with it selected, you notice it's green. That's because the Profiles layer is green. And we're going to change this one to 1.5. Now 1.5 isn't an option here. I can't also click through these to change it to 1.5. I think 2 is a little fat. 1's maybe not thick enough. So you can just go in here and click and then just type 1.5 and press enter. You can see now we got a variation in line weight there, just a little bit. Okay. So again, you can play with this. I think this is sort of a good ratio. I'm actually going to change the Edges one. So I just locked Profiles and unlocked Edges, so that way I can click on it without having to worry about selecting my Profiles. I'm going to do 0.3. Let's see what that looks like. Maybe a little bit better. I like that. I think it looks pretty good. So like I said, you want that sort of clear distinction between them. You could change it to something else if you wanted. Let's try 3.5 or 0.35. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. That looks pretty good. So you could just stop here if you really wanted to for most projects, especially if you're doing like a plan or a section or even an isometric in some ways, elevations, anything that's like a drawing. You could probably stop here if you wanted to. But we are going to go ahead and add the render in. So what I'm going to do is lock Edges, click on Render, so that's my current layer. Then go to File, Place one more time, and we're going to go to this one. It's a PNG file or a ping. We're going to place it. You can try and place it right here, but it's not going to come in at the same size. So it may be a good reference for you though. But you can see this one is pretty huge, right? So now what I'm going to need to do is I need to match the image to my drawing. You could go the other way around, but the drawing's already fitting the page. So what I'm going to do is grab from this opposite corner and start scaling it. Now you got to be careful though, because it's changing the proportions right now. right? So that's not what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold shift while I do this, okay? And I'm going to try and get it sort of close here. I could try and line these edges up, but they're not exactly the same. So just getting it kind of close here. This is honestly the most tedious part of this whole thing, where I'm sort of aligning the image behind the drawing. And so you can see that it's not quite big enough, right? Like this brown should be over here to the right. So I'm just going to pull it to the right some. It looks pretty good. And you can see I probably could have increased the quality of the image. You're going to have to go a little bit back and forth here in Illustrator when you're doing this, unfortunately. When I move the left, it, for some reason, also moves the right. That's just the way that the sort of scaling tool works. So, again, just kind of going back and forth here until we get it reasonably close. This sort of depends on how big your image is, honestly. Like if I have one that's like the full size of this sheet, which in this case it is, I'm going to need to really take my time here to make sure that it's the right size. Now, one thing I could do also, you can see this is sort of bleeding over the edges here. I'm going to use the arrow keys real quick to get that kind of close. Is I could kind of crop it if I really wanted to, a little bit smaller. And we're going to do that here in a minute anyways to get rid of this SketchUp for Schools thing up there. But it looks pretty good to me. So again, I'm sort of checking like opposite points here. Maybe a little bit off here. Like that's just like subtly off. So I'm kind of looking at that edge right there. And then looking here and looking there. Looks about perfect to me. So, okay. So you can see that it's kind of big. It's larger than the sheet, which is fine, but I really don't want the SketchUp for Schools thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a circular clipping mask. Now you could use the pen tool for this too, but I just wanted to show you that you can create a circle. So I clicked with the circle tool or the ellipse tool. You can see that it's not giving me a perfect circle, but I can create a clipping mask by holding shift. And it'll give me a perfect circle. And now, with that circle, I'm going to hold shift and click on the image, then right click and hit make clipping mask. And it basically crops the shaded area to that region. Okay. You don't have to do that. These are just different options for you. So in this case, it might not actually work that well. So I think what I'm going to do is just delete that circle and then simply use the pen tool to circle or enclose the area that you want, like that. You don't have to be so precise here. I just basically want this to be outside of it. So again, I'm going to hold shift, click on the image, and go to make clipping mask, and it just gets rid of that. Okay. I can unlock all the layers now. Click and drag to select them so I'm getting all the colors, and then I can resize them. I'm holding shift and alt to scale it towards the center and keep it in proportion. Okay. So yeah, that's a simple way to do this. The nice thing here is that you have some control now. Like I can toggle just the render on and off. If I just wanted it, I could, let's say lock these, come in here, change the opacity or something, drop it down so I get a little bit of shading in there. If I wanted to. Again, it just affords you some more control over your drawing. Okay. So lastly, I think it's a good idea to always add some text in any architectural drawing. So I'm going to come up here to Profiles and hit the plus button. That just adds one on top of it. So I'm going to double click on this and we'll call it text. And then within this layer, I'm going to click on the T here for the text tool. And I'm just going to click once. I only have like one line here, so I'm just going to call this Zinc Mine Museum. And then Peter Zumthor is the architect. Because I single clicked, I can actually like resize this with shift like that. You could edit the font as well. So if you come up here, you can choose through all these and you can see it updated in real time. So I don't know, let's pick, let's see if they have something. Let's do no Helvetica, that's okay. We'll choose yeah, I mean, now I'm getting nitpicky with fonts here. So yeah, that's nice. We'll do simplex. I can resize it. You can make one of them bold. I believe this kind of depends on the font here. So so I could come in here and go to character, I believe. And then let's see. Yeah. Okay. So simplex doesn't actually have an option for it. That's okay. I can honestly always just add like a stroke to this. And it kind of beefs it up a little bit. So it's kind of cheating, but it works in this case. So I can see there's a little bit of distinction there between the two. So, last thing. Because we made the render with no background, I'm going to go ahead and add another layer, but I'm going to drag it below render. And so with this, what that means is like I can add like a rectangle or something back here. And let me increase the opacity of this guy real quick. So if I bring this back up to 100%, and then I change like the color of this, you'll really be able to tell sort of what's going on. So there's no sky, right? If I were to have done this with without checking that little box, I wouldn't be able to do this in this case. So now I'm just kind of fiddling around with settings here. So yeah, that's how you can add a background and still have your model be in front of it. So it's sort of 3D in some ways. So you can start to layer these things as you see fit. So there you go.